All right, well, if you're a Met fan, you're probably feeling pretty good this morning. It's an off day. We don't always love that. You don't have a game to look forward to tonight, but coming off of a 5-2 road trip, sitting here on Monday, June 9th, 2025, I'm going to confidently say that right now, on this day, the Mets are the best team in baseball. Now, before you go crazy and say that I'm getting ahead of myself or that the Met fans are getting ahead of themselves, baseball's a long season, I get that. But right now, after this last week, after this stretch of games, I could say that right now, today, the Mets are the best team in baseball. Will they still be in a week or 2 weeks or a month from now? I don't know. But right now, they are. They just came off of a 5-2 West Coast trip where it started off with the Dodgers. They lost a couple of heartbreaking games in that, but they really showed that they were the better team for those 4 games. They should have won at least 3 of them. Most likely 4 of them, but they settled with a 4-game split. They split with the Dodgers 2-2, and really what they showed there is that they can go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers. Now, I understand you're facing the Dodgers without Snell, without Glasnow, without Sasaki. You didn't face Yamamoto. That's all true. Those are all realistic things to say. But that's how baseball works. You're not always going to face a team when they're at their best. Maybe the Mets weren't at that best. Even back when the Mets played the Dodgers at Citi Field, the Mets weren't at their best, and they won 2 out of 3. They weren't hitting on all cylinders. They just weren't playing that well, and they still took 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers. And in this series, if the Mets weren't playing so sloppy defensively, maybe got a couple of calls to go their way by the umpires, you're talking about taking 3 out of 4 or possibly even sweeping that series. So the Mets showed everyone, including us and themselves, that they're right there with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are nothing to be feared, and going into the playoffs, if the Mets do face the Dodgers in the playoffs this year, they can win that series. Last year, the Mets went on their miracle run. We've talked about it 1,000 times. We don't have to keep going into it. We know since June of last year, the Mets have been the best team in baseball. But going into the playoffs, you didn't fear Milwaukee and still almost lost to Milwaukee. You didn't fear Philadelphia. That turned out to be the correct decision because Philadelphia just bombed out in the playoffs and the Mets beat them easily. And then when you went to go play the Dodgers, you said, this magical run might be over. The Dodgers are just much better. They seem like a team of destiny. They just keep coming at you. They just hit. They're relentless. And that proved to be true. The Mets were clearly not the better team. The Dodgers beat them fair and square, no issues there. The Dodgers were the better team, and obviously they went on to win the World Series. So it's clear that they were the better team. This year, if we face them again, I don't fear the Dodgers. I think the Mets should be the favorites. Even if the Dodgers are healthy and they have all their pitching, it doesn't matter. I think the Mets can go toe-to-toe with them, and I think that this series against them showed that, and not just us, not just them, but the world, that the Mets are actually a good team. And they're not a fluke, and they're not going to fall apart. And this is a good team. So that was one lesson learned from this road trip. Another thing that I think the Mets hopefully will learn from that Dodger series is you can't get a lead early or score some runs early and then kind of go to sleep and kind of just try not to lose a game. You need to attack. You need to try to keep scoring runs. The Mets have still had some issues with runners in scoring position, though it's gotten better lately. They've been getting some more timely hits. They've been scoring more runs. They've been hitting home runs. They've been showing a lot of that power that we thought they would have early in the season. It's finally starting to come together, and their pitching is still performing well. But when you play a team like the Dodgers, even if you go up 5-0, 6-0, the game's not over. If you go up 5-0, 6-0 against the Rockies, yeah, the game's over. But not against the Dodgers, because they're going to keep hitting, they're going to keep fighting, they're relentless, they're going to keep coming at you. And I hope that the Mets kind of learn from their mistakes in that Dodgers series of, we need to keep being aggressive, keep hitting, get those big timely hits. I know it's easier said than done, but sometimes with them it seems almost like they not that they stop trying, but they go to sleep. They kind of rest on a lead. They're not being aggressive. And the leads can get away from them sometimes. So I hope they learn that from the Dodgers series, that you have to keep attacking and have to keep being aggressive. And then going into the Rockies series, to me, that seemed like it might have been a letdown. All these West Coast trips, even playing against bad teams, the Mets have a tendency in the past to go into those series and really just bomb out and not not look so good against those bad teams. I don't know if it's the plane travel or what, but in the past they to me, I was like, I expected them to lose 2 out of 3 to the Rockies almost, because it's coming off of a big series against the Dodgers. Now you're facing a lesser team. You're on the West Coast. You're far from home, and those always kind of turn out badly for the Mets. But we were reminded in this series that this year's Mets are different than the Mets of the past. They go in, they completely dominate the Rockies. First game was a little rough, and it had me more into my mind thinking, oh, this is where they kind of blow it. They didn't. Big hit by Alonso in that game. Huge hit by Lindor coming off the bench after missing a couple games with the broken toe. Really just a nice performance to get the win, 4-2 in the first game. Then obviously the rest, the other 2 games weren't even close. They went 8-1 and then 13-5 in Game 3, and they outscored the Rockies 25-8 in that series. So, believe it or not, that series meant more to me than the Dodgers, only because that's the kind of series that's always one of those letdowns that the Mets tend to lose. And they didn't. They performed, and really they dominated. In two of the 3 games, they dominated a bad team like they really haven't been able to do all year. The Mets have played down to their competition a lot this year, and they didn't let that happen in Colorado, and they came out with the sweep and looked really good. That's why I say they're the number 1 team, because yes, they beat the Rockies, and they split with the Dodgers. But they dominated the Rockies, and in all honesty, for the most part of the Dodger series, they were dominating the Dodgers. Couple mistakes that they made cost them a couple games, but they were the better team, and they looked like a really good team this week, and that's why I really say they're the best team in baseball right now. Now, if we look around the NL East right now, the Mets have put themselves in a really good position. They've played extremely well. They're 18 games over 500. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they have a 4.5 game lead on the second place Phillies, who just got swept by the Pittsburgh Pirates. Right now, the Phillies are just not playing well at all. They're not hitting. Their pitching's been decent in some areas, but they're just not getting much offense. Harper's out again. They just look out of whack. To me, it looks like the Phillies kind of got old really quickly, and maybe we overrated them a little bit. Then the Nationals are in third place, 30-35. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games. That's who the Mets play next, and they're 11.5 games back. So, the only team right now within spitting distance of the Mets is the Phillies at 4.5 games back, and they're just not playing well, and the Mets are. And the Mets still have a favorable schedule going forward, playing the Nationals, then playing the Rays. Tough teams, no doubt, teams that can beat you if you overlook them. They're good teams, but teams that the Mets are better than and should beat. So the Nationals 30-35, and then the biggest surprise of the year right now is that the Braves are 27-37, 10 games under 500. They're 2-8 in their last 10, and they just got swept by the Giants, who are a good team. But still, you don't want to get swept by anyone if you're the Braves. They have too much talent to be 10 games under 500. There's something going on with the Braves. Not sure what it is. The Marlins. You don't even really need to talk about the Marlins. They're just not very good. 24-39. They're 16.5 games back. So right now, the Mets are just in a really good position. Really, you're only fighting it out with Philly right now, and you have a 4.5 game lead on them. Even if you go out there and lose 5 games in a row, the odds are that the Phillies are going to lose 1 or 2 of those games, and you're still going to have a lead, even if you lose 5 in a row. So really happy with the way that the Mets have put themselves into this spot right here. They've beaten the teams that they had to, and they've played really well against the best teams as well. I think they're 20-12 against teams with records above 500, so they're playing really well. They're beating good teams, they're beating bad teams. I think they're 24-7 at home, which is the best home record in baseball. They just look pretty unbeatable at home no matter who they're playing, and that's what good teams do. They dominate at home. They've clearly liked playing in front of the Mets fans. It's been a great season for the Mets so far. But really, this NL East has turned out to not be what we thought it was. We thought it was going to be a 3-team race between the Mets, Phillies, and Braves. Most people had the Braves winning the division, and the Phillies really fighting them for it, and then the Mets probably being that third-place team, maybe the last wild card kind of team. And it hasn't worked out that way. The Mets have led the NL East for most of the year. It's been back and forth between them and Philadelphia, but the Mets have led for most of the year in the NL East. And honestly, the Phillies just look like maybe they got old. You have Schwarber, who's in the last year of his deal, but he's still performing. He's probably the only one overperforming on that team. He's hitting around 250. He's got a 930 OPS. He's got 20 home runs and 46 RBI. So he's nothing. He has nothing to be ashamed of. He's hit very well this season. But then you go down the list. Harper, he's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. He's only batting 258 with an 814 OPS, 9 home runs, 34 RBIs. Not a Harper type season. He can get hot if he gets healthy and starts to perform. He can carry that team, but he just hasn't looked the same this year. I think the injuries are kind of catching up with him. He just doesn't look like the same guy. And then Turner, yes, he's hitting 300 this year with a 799 OPS. He's got 7 home runs and 30 RBIs. For the amount of money that he's making, the contract that he got, he's not living up to it. I think that was a mistake, and it was a mistake I would have made too, because I loved Turner when he was at the Nationals, when he was with the Dodgers, but it doesn't look like that contract's going to really turn out to be a great one. Who knows? Maybe he comes through and turns into something. I don't know, but he has not been as advertised in Philadelphia. And then you get to the two guys who are really hurting them right now, mostly Real Muto. Real Muto was signed to a long-term deal with Philly. He was the best catcher in the league when he signed that deal. Right now he's hitting 220 with a 650 OPS. He's got 5 home runs and 22 RBIs. As an offensive catcher, he got old, and he's past his prime. He's not the same guy. I don't think he ever will be again. He's just not very good anymore. That's the problem with giving long-term contracts. The Mets are going to see that eventually too, when, in 4 or 5 years when Lindor is getting old, and, Soto in 10 years is an old player and they still have him for 5 more years. That's going to happen. You have to, when you give those long-term contracts, you have to understand that the end of them is going to be bad. And right now, Real Muto looks bad. Castellanos is hitting 282, but he's only got 6 home runs and 32 RBIs. That's not really what he's there for. He's one of the power guys in that lineup, and he's just not producing very much power. So you can see they're having some down years from some of their marquee players, and that's really been an issue because their pitching that was supposed to be great really hasn't been. They've had a couple guys who've pitched well. Wheeler still has a sub-3 ERA. They've had some guys who have pitched well. But Aaron Nola, who got a big contract out of them, has an ERA over 6. He's 1-7 with an ERA over 6. He's given up 11 home runs in 49 innings. I know he's on the injured list. And Jesus Luzardo, who was really their biggest pickup of the offseason, he's 5-2 with a 4.5 ERA. He's given up 81 hits and 24 walks in 72 innings. So he's had some good starts, and he's had a couple of really bad starts. And that's kind of what he's been throughout his whole career. A guy who has a lot of talent, but has never really put it together all the way. The Phillies thought maybe they can get him, fixed or whatever, and it just hasn't worked out. So their pitching has not been as good as they thought it would be, and their offense hasn't performed the way they thought it would, except for Kyle Schwarber. He's been the only guy who's performed, up to par for him. When it comes down to it at the end of the day, I really think the Phillies' problem is just they're getting old and their window is closing. Now, before the season started, I was someone who, I had the Phillies finishing third in the division. I didn't see them being a superstar team or a great team. Obviously with their exit in the playoffs last year from the Mets after dominating the NL East all year, I kind of thought that their window was closing and maybe it had already closed. And it seems like right now, even though they're 9 games over 500, they still have had a pretty good season. They've just been, hampered by underperforming older players like Castellanos, Real Muto, Bryce Harper. He's not old, but you know what I mean. He just isn't the same guy necessarily. Schwarber's been their only consistent player, their only real good offensive piece. And then on the pitching side, they've been very inconsistent. Zach Wheeler's starting to get hit a little bit more. He doesn't look as dominant as he once was. So I think the Phillies, they're just, maybe their window is closed or closing quickly. They need to make a big deal if they want to go forward in this season and do some damage in the playoffs. I don't think that they have enough right now to really compete with the Mets or even with the Braves if the Braves are playing well. Now, if we look at the Braves, this is probably the biggest surprise of the season for me. I thought that the Braves were going to be the best team in this division. I thought that the Mets would finish second in this division to the Braves. I thought the Braves were the second best team in baseball behind the Dodgers coming into it. That's why you play the games, because so far this year, obviously the Braves are 10 games under 500. They're just not playing well. They've never really gotten going. They had a stretch where they were getting close to 500. I think they were 2 games under, and they were starting to play well, and maybe even they got one under and were playing to get back to 500, and then they fell apart again. And they started off the season with a lot of injuries, especially to two big players. Acuna, who was out since last year with the knee injury, and he came back a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point. And Strider, who started the season on the injured list, came up. I think he made one start and then got hurt again and went back out. And now he's back, and he just doesn't look right either. So those are two big pieces that haven't been much part of this team, and they're still working their way back from injury. Now, Acuna's been very good since returning. He's hitting over 300. He's got 4 home runs. He's playing well. Strider has not hit his stride, for lack of a better term, but Strider and Acuna were huge parts of this team, and they haven't really been there all year and haven't been consistent enough. But if you look around their lineup, this is a feared lineup with Olsen and Riley and Azuna and Harris and all these guys. They're really good players, but they've all underperformed this year. And you talk about Olsen, he's hitting 236. He's got an 802 OPS, but that's 50 points under his career average. He's got 13 home runs, 37 RBIs, and this is the second year that he's been struggling. After hitting over 50 home runs a couple years ago, last year he hit 29, and this year he's at 13, so he's on pace for, maybe 30, around 30 home runs. So out of your first baseman who you pay a lot of money to, he's underperformed, and he's 50 points under his career OPS. Austin Riley, he's hitting 279. He's got a 782 OPS, which is also 50 points under his career. He's got 11 home runs and 35 RBIs. That's regression. That's showing he's not playing as well this year as he has in the past. Azuna, he's hitting 260 with an 827 OPS. I think he's still like top 15 in baseball in OPS, but that's 100 points less than his OPS last year. I think last year he was a 924. This year he's an 827. He's got 10 home runs and 28 RBI. So he has not performed well. And Michael Harris, 237 with a 608 OPS, 4 home runs, 36 RBIs. Listen, he was never a big masher with this team. He was never going to be a big home run guy, but you expect him to be better than a 237 average with a 600 OPS. He has not been good. So you've seen a lot of offensive regression with this team. Not a team you're necessarily scared of playing, but when they play the Mets, they'll probably score 10 runs a game. That's just the way it works. Braves versus Mets, it's always going to be a problem. But if you look at their offensive numbers overall, they're pretty much middle of the pack. They got a 240 average, that's 18th in the league, a 700 OPS, that's 17th in the league. They've hit 68 home runs, that's 14th. And then their ERA, they're 13th with a 3.79. So they don't do anything well. They're kind of middle of the road in every statistical category. So the Braves just don't look good, and it looks like maybe they're going to fire their manager. I don't know. He's been with the organization for like 30 years or 40 years, something crazy like that. So I think it would be hard for them to get rid of him. But it's a possibility, and maybe that's what they need. I think the Braves' issue right now might be mental. It might be something where they need to do something to get back on track. I don't know if they've had team meetings. I don't know if they've done any of that. That seemed to work for the Mets last year. Maybe it is firing their manager. Maybe it's firing some coaches. Maybe it's... I have no idea. Obviously, the Profar getting suspended for PEDs early in the season and everyone else kind of underperforming and Acuna being out and Strider being out has hurt them. But this is too good of a team to be this bad, to be 10 games under 500. I'm not ready to say they're dead yet. I know a lot of people are already saying the Braves are dead. They could easily ring off 10 in a row and get back to 500. And then once you get to 500, you just got to start playing a little better. You slowly start to work your way up. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to win the division this year. They're already 14 games back in June. It's not impossible, but it would be improbable at this point. The Mets would have to completely collapse for the Braves to really have any chance, and I just don't see that happening. But I'm never going to call the Braves dead until they're dead, because we know how it works with the Braves and Mets. They always break the Mets' heart. The Mets do play the Braves 7 times this month. They have not played the Braves yet this year. They go to Atlanta for a 3-game series in the middle of the month. I think the 17th, 18th, 19th, something around there. And then the Braves come into Citi Field for a 4-game series at the end of the month. So the Mets have a chance to bury the Braves. If the Mets can win 5 out of those 7, maybe even 6 or 7 out of who knows? If the Braves are playing really bad, sure, you can win all of them. But the Mets do have a chance to bury the Braves this month. That would be great. That's when I would say the Braves are dead. But it would have to come at the hands of the Mets. After all that's happened between the two organizations over the years, the Braves, death of their season coming from the Mets would be amazing. Just bury them. But that's later on. That's not coming up now. Next we have the Nationals. Obviously, a big in-division series. The Nationals are a pesky team. The Mets don't play well against them. James Wood is looking like a superstar, and they have a lot of really good young players. It's going to be a tough series. It always is when the Mets play the Nationals. Hopefully the Mets can win 2 out of 3 and keep their momentum going. And like I said, I think the Mets are the best team in baseball right now, so I don't have any problem saying that they're going to win 2 out of 3. I think that they will. I think that they'll take care of business, especially at home against the Nationals and the Rays. And I think we're looking at another really good week here for the Mets. So I don't have much more else. Let me know in the comments if you think the Braves are dead. I want to know if you think the Braves are just done at this point, if they maybe have a little bit of a run left in them, maybe they can get to a wild card spot. Just let me know if you think they're dead. Also, if you're new here, you like this type of content, please subscribe, give me a like, all that kind of stuff. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Give me a like and comment whatever you want. And until next time, let's go Mets.